My mother slammed my autistic brother's face into his dinner plate for staring at her key. When I begged her to stop, she screamed, "You want it? You think you deserve to look at what's mine?" I just found out what that key was for. I regret ever being curious. My mother wore a brass key around her neck that would one day save our lives. But first, it almost killed us. She never took it off, not in the shower, not in bed. The leather cord had left a permanent groove in her skin after 13 years of never removing it. Growing up, there was one rule that mattered above all else. No one touches the key. When I was 6, I asked her what had opened. She held my hand over the stove burner until the skin bubbled and peeled. After that, I learned to look away when she leaned down. But Sam was 8 and had autism. He couldn't remember rules like that. She caught him staring at it during dinner, his eyes following the key as it swung when she reached for the salt. I saw her face shift. She grabbed his jaw and slammed his head into the table. The crack echoed through the kitchen. Blood splattered onto his mac and cheese as she did it again. "You want it?" she screamed. "You think you deserve to look at what's mine?" The emergency room doctor believed her bike accident story. They always did. Sam came home with his jaw wired shut, and she made him write lines with his broken fingers. The punishments in our house were always specific. Hot spoons pressed into our arms for talking back, bleach in the bathwater for impure thoughts, stand in the corner on one foot for 6 hours if you breathed too loud. She touched that key before each punishment like she was asking permission from it. By the time I was 14, I'd mapped every lock in the house. The key didn't fit any of them. Not the basement door, not her jewelry box, not the filing cabinet. Sam thought it opened a safety deposit box. I thought maybe it was for her childhood home. We whispered theories at night once the house was quiet. The torture got worse as we grew up. She'd make us kneel on dry rice for hours, stuff soap in our mouths until we threw up, lock us in the basement freezer for 30-second bursts, just long enough to hurt, not long enough to leave marks anyone else would notice. She was clever like that. One night she kept Miles awake for 72 straight hours, spraying him with ice water whenever his eyes started to close. I listened to him sob through the walls while she laughed. Something in me broke. We had to get out, or we'd die there. That's when I started to plan. I got a job at Wendy's and hid cash in an empty tampon box under my bed. I looked up youth shelters in other states, but minimum wage wasn't enough for 2 bus tickets, food, and a safe place to sleep. We needed more. I found the floorboard by accident. She was at her Wednesday church meeting, and I was stealing her sleeping pills to help Sam rest. My foot caught on a loose board in her closet. Beneath it was a keyhole. She knew. She always knew everything. I woke up zip-tied in the basement. 1 week down there, nothing but water and stale bread. When she let me out, she was smiling. "Curiosity is a waste of time," she said. "Remember that." 6 months later, she told us Sam was too damaged to keep, said she'd found a special facility upstate that could help him handle his issues better. I knew there was no facility. I'd heard her on the phone asking about unmarked graves. That's when I set my plan in motion. Every Friday, she drank herself stupid after hurting us. I've been stealing her Ambient for months, grinding it into powder. That Friday, I put 20 pills in her vodka. She took forever to pass out. I sat on the stairs counting her breaths until they got slow and deep. The key had fallen forward on its cord. I lifted it off her neck so slowly it took 5 minutes. Sam kept watch while I ran to her room. The floorboard came up easily. I turned the key and heard the lock click. Inside was $30,000 in cash. Our birth certificates, but with different names. Tyler and Mason Wilcox, not Sam and Ryan Kelly. Our real parents' death certificates. Police photos of a wrecked car, 2 bodies in the front seats. At the bottom, adoption paperwork that never got filed, and our father's service weapon, a Glock 19, fully loaded. She wasn't our mother. She was our father's sister. She'd claimed both kids and the survivor benefits. 9 years of checks meant for us.
I stared at the gun for a long time. Part of me wanted to use it, end her the way she ended them. But we weren't like her. I took the cash and our real documents, left the Glock and the rest of the evidence for whoever found it. We caught a Greyhound to Seattle at 3 a.m. and never heard from her again, until a month later when there was a knock at the door. It wasn't my mother. It was the police. Turns out she had used the Glock to end her life. She even left a note behind. In it, she blamed everything, her collapse, her ruined life, on me and Sam. The officer stood in our doorway holding official paperwork with names I haven't heard out loud in 13 years. Adam and James Henley. Sam rocked in the corner of our tiny Seattle apartment, sensing danger the way he always did. His fingers tapped a pattern against his thigh that I knew meant fear. The taller officer cleared his throat and explained about the suicide. She'd left a note. Sam started humming our real mother's lullaby, the one from before everything turned dark. The officers exchanged a glance. That song, that detail, it was something they couldn't have known unless we really were who the paperwork claimed. My response slipped out before I could stop it. She actually found our birth certificates. The words hung in the air, pulling the officers forward with sudden interest. What else might be hidden if we'd gone so far to vanish? Our neighbor across the hall chose that moment to rush out, panicked about a break-in at her place. She needed help immediately. The officers looked between her and us, and I had to make a choice: step in to help and seem like good people, or freeze and look guilty. Sam whispered from his corner, barely audible, "She's watching." I tried to move between the officers and Sam, who had creeped closer despite how scared he was, but the shorter officer had already unfolded the suicide note. He read it out loud in a flat, clinical voice. Sam started hitting himself the moment he heard the words, "You stole everything from me." Even secondhand, her handwriting sent a cold shock through me. His meltdown was fast and brutal. He slammed his head into the wall, screaming without words. The officer stepped back, reaching for his radio. They called for backup and social services. 3 problems slammed into me at once. Sam needed his medication, but the prescription was under a fake name. The police wanted to take us in for questioning, and our landlord had just appeared at the end of the hallway, red-faced about noise complaints from other tenants. I rushed to handle the landlord first, pulling out our lease to prove we were legitimate tenants. But the document had the wrong names. Wilcox. The officer's eyes narrowed as he compared the lease to the birth records in his hand. "But this says Wilcox," he said quietly. Whatever sympathy had flickered behind their eyes was already slipping away. I admitted we'd been using fake names. The words came out in a frantic tumble, but trying to explain why without sounding completely insane was almost impossible. How could I make them believe the abuse, the murders, the 13 years of psychological torture when we had no real proof? Sam had stopped screaming, but now began to rattle off facts in his robotic tone, the way he always did when overwhelmed. Our real birth dates, our social security numbers, everything he'd memorized from those stolen documents. He was telling the truth, but to them it probably looked like a coached story, like I drilled it into him, like I was manipulating a vulnerable man for some twisted reason. Then I saw it. In the evidence bag the shorter officer was carrying. Her jewelry. She'd kept our mother's wedding ring all those years. Through the plastic, I could just barely make out the inscription inside the band. The room tilted as I realized the full weight of what she'd done. The officers decided to separate us for questioning. Sam started screaming about the key as they led him down the hall, his words only making me look more like someone who had filled his head with fantasies. The brass key that had dominated our childhood was now evidence in her death. The social worker arrived within an hour. She was worn down, but had kind eyes, the kind of tired that comes from witnessing too much pain. She asked for our medical records. I had to explain they didn't exist. The woman, our aunt, had destroyed everything before we turned 6. The only medical records we had were from her doctor, under fake names, and those files were filled with 13 years of visit logs. Every time she'd brought us in with injuries,
Every lie she'd ever told. Every time she painted us as disturbed, violent kids who hurt ourselves. My explanation of how we escaped sounded exactly like the revenge fantasies recorded in my therapy files. The woman had forced me to see a therapist, her friend, who wrote everything down and twisted it beyond recognition. Now my desperate truth read like the delusions of an unstable young man who drugged his mother and robbed her blind. Her Facebook memorial page was already full. Loving mother, devoted caregiver, taken too soon. People noticed our absence from the funeral. Over and over. Heartless. Cold. What kind of sons abandon their mother like that? Even the neighbors in our building had started their own thread, sharing screenshots and speculating wildly. I tried to show the police evidence on my phone, photos, voice recordings, just in case, but the detective flagged it as obsessive. He said, no normal person keeps this kind of record on a parent. He called it premeditation, fixation. Then came the will, dated 2 years before her death. We were named as beneficiaries, with a cruel catch. We'd only inherit if we completed a reconciliation therapy program. The therapist named in the will, her best friend, the same one who'd written reports for years accusing me of violent ideation. I hadn't slept in over 70 hours. The pressure, the interrogations, the paranoia, it made me trip over my words. When explaining the timeline of her death, I misspoke. When we called, I started, then corrected, when she called. But it was too late. The detective's pen scratched across his notepad with purpose. Sam's autism advocate had arrived to observe the questioning. The therapist, her friend, had already reached out to her, armed with years of emails expressing concern about her violent sons. She documented everything, the friend told her. File folders of manufactured reports. The advocate's sympathy turned towards Sam, but not in the way we needed. She saw him as a victim of me. The neighbors had begun whispering in the hallway. Those brothers, the ones who drove their poor mother to suicide. Someone had even started a private Facebook group for the building. Screenshots, security footage, rumors. They twisted everything they could into digital proof of our supposed cruelty. The woman had claimed Sam attacked her the week before we ran. She had hospital records to prove it. Self-inflicted injuries, bruises, a split lip, scratches down her arms, all logged as assault by her son. My only friend in Seattle worked for a tech company. I'd been meaning to ask for help, maybe even crash at his place. But his boss turned out to be her brother. He'd flown out to handle things. After that, my friend stopped replying to messages. I tried to prove one of her lies, pulling her medical records from when she said we'd poisoned her. But how I got them? That would have meant admitting I'd violated HIPAA laws. The truth would have made me a criminal. Every attempt to defend ourselves only made things worse. A bodega's security camera caught us the day after she died. We'd stopped for food and supplies. The relief on our faces was clear. We smiled, laughed. Sam flapped his hands in his happy rhythm. That footage spread fast. What kind of monsters celebrate their mother's death? Her brother showed up at our building 3 days after the police. He insisted we call him Uncle, although we'd never seen him before. He stood in our doorway with legal papers in hand, claiming guardianship of Sam. She had planned this. Even from the grave, she had set a trap to tear us apart. One last manipulation, a posthumous custody battle. I could see the whole thing now as I looked at the uncle's sympathetic expression. She had orchestrated everything. The note, the timeline, the false documentation, even her death was a final act of control. Her way of making sure we never really got free. Sam pressed against me, humming anxiously as the uncle spoke gently about what's best. His voice was soft, calm, reasonable. He even quoted her favorite self-help book, without realizing it.
Her words lived on through him. He had already started dating my manager at the Wendy's where I worked. By the end of the week, I was fired. Unreliable during a family crisis, they said. The uncle expressed such heartfelt sympathy when he heard. These things happen, he murmured. Family comes first. We even compared memories of the same Christmas morning from years ago. In his version, she was in the kitchen baking cookies while we unwrapped gifts. In mine, Sam and I were locked in the basement while she entertained her church friends upstairs. We both believed our memories completely. She had poisoned every version of the past so thoroughly that we couldn't even trust reality anymore. The following week, my old texts resurfaced in the uncle's custody filing. Messages I'd sent to friends, venting about wanting her gone, planning to run away, dreaming about freedom. Each message was yanked out of context and used to paint me as the violent, disturbed son she had always claimed I was. One line was highlighted in yellow across the legal docs. I've been planning this for years. Sam's first supervised visit with the uncle went better than I expected. When he came back, he talked about how the uncle was nicer. He didn't make him count rice grains when he made mistakes. He bought the brand of crackers Sam liked. Small kindnesses. Each one felt like a betrayal. 2 weeks after her death, new footage surfaced. Doorbell camera video from a neighbor. It showed her standing on our doorstep, crying and begging us to be good boys. But the camera didn't catch what happened before she pressed the bell. Didn't show the burns hidden under our shirts. Didn't catch the way she smiled at us through the window just before putting on her performance. Family court dismissed my allegations of abuse as classic parental alienation. The mediator explained it all with clinical certainty. Children who lose a parent often invent elaborate justifications for their anger. My detailed records were used as evidence of obsession, not survival. Every photo, every note I had, it all became twisted, weaponized. I had used her passwords to access her email before the uncle could change them. In her drafts folder was a manuscript, a memoir about raising disturbed boys. An agent had already reached out. She had received an advance. Our trauma, our pain, had been prepped and packaged for a book deal. Library security footage showed her researching narcissistic children and when to give up on unfixable kids. She'd printed articles about reactive attachment disorder and oppositional defiance, constructing her case against us while manufacturing the very behaviors she documented. My old therapist was subpoenaed to testify. The woman had forced me to go to her friend for therapy after every punishment. Those sessions were now evidence. Years of twisted notes that turned my anger into violent fantasies. I tried to record the uncle during our next conversation, hoping to capture something usable. But my phone shut down the moment he began to speak. The uncle glanced at the screen with a smile. That's when I realized he was jamming the signal. Every attempt I made to gather evidence backfired. Each failure made me look more paranoid. Sam's medications needed a guardian signature. The uncle used that as leverage. Sam had to come to him for every dose. Day by day, I watched my brother's independence vanish. He was being trained to depend on the uncle for everything. The system that should have protected us turned into yet another tool of control. The nurse who had worked at the clinic where we'd been treated, she'd seen the injuries. She'd noticed the patterns, the inconsistencies in the woman's stories. But when I approached her, she chose retirement over truth. I can't lose my pension over this. She refused to meet my eyes. Social media became another battlefield. The uncle posted a photo from her house, wearing our father's watch like it meant nothing. In the background, barely visible, our father's cologne on the dresser. Trophies of the dead, casually displayed like decor. 3 weeks into the custody fight, the uncle made his first real offer. He'd drop everything. No more court, no more questions. If I publicly said the woman had been a good mother, if I apologized for the pain we'd caused her,
If I acknowledged that we'd driven her to take her own life, it would be seen as closure, compliance. If I refused, it was framed as proof that I didn't care about Sam's stability or medical needs. Then I discovered something that shattered everything I thought I knew about the timeline. She hadn't called our parents during some ordinary drive like she always claimed. She called the day after our father filed for divorce. It hadn't been random. It had been motive. A custody battle over us. Our father had been trying to save us, and she murdered them both. Looking through old photos, I noticed something I hadn't seen before. She had been documenting bruises on herself for years. Every shot carefully angled, every timestamp matching school events or doctor's visits, each designed to suggest we'd hurt her. What I thought was evidence of her abuse turned out to be her arsenal for a restraining order she never filed. She was building a narrative in parallel. Every injury I photographed, every recording I made, she had already flipped it, turned it into validation of her victimhood. My proof became her vindication. Then the grandmother resurfaced, from the nursing home where she'd been hidden away. The women had stashed her there years ago, and now she was being pulled into a war she didn't understand. She had to choose between her daughter's memory and 2 grandsons she barely remembered. But when she saw us, there was a flicker of recognition. She whispered that the woman had been all she had left of her son. The gaslighting had been so thorough that she believed she had dementia, and now, even though she finally believed us, her testimony was inadmissible. In her clearer moments, she remembered that the woman had always been off, that our father had been afraid of his sister. But clarity doesn't undo a dementia diagnosis. Just because the gaslighting stopped didn't mean the courts would trust her now. I started photographing Sam's meltdowns, trying to show how the uncle's control was breaking him. Each photo felt like a betrayal of the brother I'd sworn to protect. Each shutter click chipped away at the protector I used to be. The coffee shop near the courthouse became my vantage point. Every Tuesday, the woman's lawyer met clients at the same table. I waited at the counter, pretending to fuss over complicated coffee orders while eavesdropping on strategy sessions. It was the only advantage I had left. Before the uncle could lock me out, I accessed the cloud storage she'd never unlinked from our shared devices. I downloaded everything: years of emails, documents, photos. Buried among the files that could destroy us were fragments that might save us. Sleep didn't matter anymore. Finding something useful did. Then came the curveball. A biological daughter emerged. She'd given up a baby for adoption before taking us. Now the stranger wanted inheritance rights, another claimant to the survivor benefits meant for us. Fighting on two fronts meant I missed Sam's psychiatric evaluation. The court labeled me a non-compliant guardian. Legal fees drained everything I'd hidden. Meanwhile, the uncle used her untouched accounts freely: funeral expenses, court fees, whatever he needed. Every dollar I spent trying to protect Sam was one less for his future care. The financial chokehold got tighter every day. A confrontation at her grave only made things worse. I'd gone to make sure she was really gone, but the uncle showed up, flowers in hand, photographer in tow. When I saw him standing there, something in me broke. My reaction scared the groundskeeper enough to call the police. Another incident on my record. Between court appearances and attorney meetings, I lost my warehouse job. The person hired to replace me? Another of the uncle's contacts. Every support system I'd built was collapsing under coordinated pressure. I started living in my car. Meanwhile, the uncle had expanded visitation. He was now staying with Sam in the same house we'd been tortured in. The address that haunted our nightmares was now Sam's part-time home. The irony cut deeper than any punishment she'd ever delivered. One day, the grandmother found me outside the courthouse. She begged me to let her daughter rest in peace. She didn't know the truth, didn't know what her daughter had done. Her tears were real. Her pain was real. And still, her daughter destroyed every life she touched. Even after death, the destruction rolled on. My investigation had collateral damage. Sam's teacher got suspended. Someone reported that she'd failed to notify the authorities about obvious signs of abuse. While the school district investigated, her daughter was left asking, "Why can't mommy teach anymore?"
Another innocent life pulled into our tragedy just by being too close. The teacher's husband confronted me outside the grocery store. He threatened consequences if I didn't stop spreading conspiracy theories that were destroying their livelihood. And I understood his anger. I was tearing through lives trying to save Sam. Even knowing the damage I was causing, I couldn't stop. Sam needed me to fight, even if it meant burning everything else down. Our public defender asked me a question I still can't shake. What if she really had been protecting you? What if you were as broken as she said? I didn't have an answer, not right away. During one custody hearing, I admitted I had drugged her to open the floorboard. The judge's expression changed instantly. Truth became confession. Survival became evidence. Every honest word drained what little credibility I had left. Inside the floorboard had been our father's journal. His final entries were haunted by doubt, fear of both his sister and his wife. What if I chose wrong, he'd written. Even he had begun questioning reality under her manipulation. Then the uncle's lawyer filed for emergency permanent guardianship. My attorney wasn't even present, stuck in traffic court with another client. The uncle's real beliefs came out during mediation. He genuinely thought she'd saved us. He truly believed she'd rescued us from violent parents. His delusion was complete, built on years of her lies. He wasn't just fighting for Sam. He was trying to avenge the sister he loved. Or maybe he simply couldn't face the truth of what she'd been. To keep building our case, I kept recording Sam's meltdowns. It meant breaking every promise I'd made to protect his dignity. I told him it was for his own good, even as I positioned the phone to capture his worst moments. The big brother I'd once been was long gone, replaced by someone cold and strategic. Manipulating the uncle's daughter to access his phone was the line I thought I'd never cross. She'd been kind to Sam during visits. She didn't deserve to be used. But I needed those messages. The uncle had admitted through texts that he knew about her instability. It was buried in years of family court arrogance. His overconfidence had slipped. It should have felt like a victory. Instead, it felt like ashes. Especially when Sam started asking if the uncle could come visit. We sat together in the courthouse bathroom crying. Two shattered brothers who'd survived hell only to walk into another kind of torment. The very system designed to protect us had become a weapon. The uncle's countersuit gained ground with every passing week. I was homeless, jobless, unstable. He had a house, a paycheck, a schedule. In family court, appearances beat truth every time. It all came down to the sealed records from her original therapist. Whatever was in those files would either destroy our case or finally validate what we had endured. Waiting for that decision became its own form of slow torture. Then the uncle's daughter messaged me. She asked why I was being so mean to her daddy. Just an innocent question from a kid. But it cracked what was left of my conscience. Using children to fight battles? That was her playbook. That was something she would have done. Her old book club and PTA friends began choosing sides. Some defended her fiercely, citing her generosity and social standing. Others, the ones she'd snubbed or ignored, started sharing stories that made sudden sense. The entire community fractured between comfort and truth. During a settlement conference, the judge made the court's priorities clear. Charlie needs a home. He needs medication, a routine. He doesn't need a brother living in a car fighting windmills. Stability over truth. Desperation led me to my father's military unit. I found his old roster. Men who'd served beside him. Men who'd made promises, combat debts they hadn't had a chance to repay. I called in every favor. One former soldier confirmed what I already suspected. Our father had feared her, but he wouldn't testify. Not publicly. Even his help felt like a betrayal. Then in discovery, we found the timeline. Our father had been preparing. He'd started collecting reports, her teenage arrests, psych evaluations from restraining orders from exes. He knew who she was. He'd tried to protect us. The final piece locked into place. She'd called our parents when our father threatened to have her committed.
The psychiatric hold paperwork was dated the day before the murders. The storage facility reeked of dust and forgotten history when I finally found our father's military footlocker. The manager had been hesitant to let me in without the proper paperwork, but after I showed him the death certificate and explained the custody battle, he relented. Inside, beneath Dad's dress uniform and medals, I found what I had been searching for. A cassette recorder, wrapped carefully in plastic. The tape inside was labeled in his handwriting. I played it in my car, my hands shaking as his voice filled the space. He'd recorded the woman, our aunt, calmly threatening our parents if they ever tried to take us away. Her voice was methodical, detached. She outlined exactly how she'd make it look like an accident. The recording cut off mid-sentence, but it was enough. I made copies at 3 different places, paranoid I'd lose the only piece of evidence strong enough to shift everything. The uncle's arrogance in earlier court filings had already given me ammunition. He had admitted that he knew she was unstable, but insisted she was still a good mother. That contradiction, paired with the tape, could finally expose the full truth. The final custody hearing came faster than expected. The courtroom was packed. Neighbors, former friends, people who had picked sides. Some still clung to the story she'd crafted. Others were starting to question it as evidence leaked out in fragments. But even in death, her presence haunted the room. Her chair at the plaintiff's table sat empty, but heavy with meaning. Sam rocked in his seat beside me, his hands fluttering in anxious rhythms. I held the folders in my lap, evidence that might finally crack the spell she had cast. Across the aisle, the uncle sat with his lawyer, still convinced he was doing the right thing. still convinced we needed saving from ourselves. His daughter wasn't there. She'd been shielded from the truth. The judge called for opening statements, but I hardly heard them. My entire focus was on that moment. The moment I would play the recording. Let her own voice, her own plans tell the story for me. Let her unravel herself in her own words. The grief counselor, who'd submitted an affidavit in support of the uncle, took the stand first. Under questioning, she admitted that the woman had confided in her, said she was saving the boys from evil parents. The counselor had thought it was metaphorical, emotional. Her face drained of color as she realized the truth. She had misread everything. The judge ordered psychological evaluations for everyone involved, including the uncle. He wanted to understand just how deep the manipulation ran, how far the delusions had spread. The uncle's lawyer objected, but the judge's face said it all. He'd seen this kind of thing before, and he knew something was very, very wrong. Then the records were unsealed. The therapist's notes, the woman's original diagnosis laid bare. Page after page confirmed it. Delusional disorder. She believed her brother, our father, was conspiring against her, that she had to save her children from him. The evidence didn't just support the murders, it explained them. She genuinely thought she was rescuing us. The uncle's breakdown was slow, unraveling piece by piece. The tape, the psych holds, the paper trail that spanned decades. I watched as the image of the sister he loved fractured before him. His lawyer tried to keep the narrative alive, but even he looked shaken. She had fooled them all. Her illness was hidden behind so many layers of charisma, generosity, performance. The judge turned to me and asked, point blank, did I want the uncle prosecuted? He'd knowingly left us with a murderer. The room froze. I looked at Sam, still rocking quietly beside me. What he needed now wasn't revenge. It was peace, stability, a life, family, even if it was broken. The uncle had been a victim too. He had enabled her, yes, but out of delusion, not malice. I told the judge I didn't want him jailed. I wanted him to get help. The room stirred. Even the uncle seemed stunned. His tears looked real. And not just for her. They were for himself, too, for finally seeing the truth and realizing how far he'd helped carry the lie. The judge gave a clear ruling. I would retain full custody of Sam. The uncle would receive supervised visitation.
After completing a treatment program, the uncle was granted supervised visits. The judge acknowledged that healing wouldn't come quickly, not for anyone touched by her chaos. But it would come. The survivor benefits were officially restored to us. The money she had stolen year after year finally redirected to its rightful purpose. Outside the courthouse, the community divided again, this time along different lines. Those who had always sensed something was wrong felt vindicated. Those who had enabled her, out of ignorance, convenience, or denial, were now left to wrestle with their silence. The neighborhood association fractured over how they'd failed to see the signs. That night, Sam and I returned to Seattle, scarred, but together. The money she had hoarded would now fund Sam's therapy. It would pay for his healing, for the future she never wanted us to have. The apartment felt different, lighter, like we could finally breathe again without legal documents stacked on the kitchen counter. The uncle's first supervised visit came 3 months later. He had completed his initial treatment and seemed genuinely committed to understanding how deeply he'd been manipulated. Sam was cautious, but open, willing to try. Because sometimes, even from the wreckage, family could be rebuilt. 6 months after the ruling, we visited our parents' real graves. Their headstones finally bore their true names. The false identities, the hidden history, finally corrected. Sam held the brass key in his hand, the one we had feared for so long. It no longer held power over us. He knelt between their graves and laid it down with care.
The key that had once locked away evidence of murder now rested with its victims. His words were simple, but they settled into my chest with the weight of something final. It opens the truth now. The brass was tarnished, dulled by time and memory, but its meaning had transformed. In that moment, I understood what justice truly was. Not punishment, not revenge, but acceptance. Evil, we'd learned, could wear a familiar face. It could twist love into something violent and controlling. She probably loved us, in her broken, diseased way, but love twisted by fear and delusion is not the kind of love that heals. It devours. Survival had meant choosing which version of family to rebuild, which truths to live by. The burn scars on my palm would never fade. Sam's jaw would always click slightly when he chewed. Trust would return, slowly, if at all. But we were Adam and James now, legally. Even if in our hearts we would always be Ryan and Sam. The names we'd chosen meant just as much as the ones we'd been given. Standing there between our parents' graves, I understood. Some wounds never fully close. Some truths can't be wrapped up neatly. But we had survived, and we had found our way back to the people we were meant to become.